Back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Benjamin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an article. A distinguished member of this committee,
Without objection, so ordered.
confirmed that there was, in fact, a pause in offensive cyber operations earlier this year. The SecDef just denied this. This committee deserves to know whether the Secretary just lied. Mr. Secretary, many believed you were underqualified for this role. You've been Secretary for 4.5 months now. For the sake of the American people and our service members, I hope you've done your homework since. Let's talk Indo-PACOM. What year has the Navy publicly set as the benchmark for being ready to fight a war with China?
Well, it needs to be right now. We know what China has said.
I'm glad to hear that, but there is a publicly
right
set date.
Well, we know it wouldn't be prudent for me in this environment to reveal when we think we're ready. That's what China has said, and we understand what they're saying, and we want to be capable and ready for it.
Not a filibuster.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a recent congressional hearing that brought up some extremely pressing issues for U.S. national security, everything from cyber operations, U.S. military readiness against China, vulnerabilities in Europe, the evolution of drone warfare, and even some pretty serious accusations about leadership failures at the very top of the Department of Defense. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm here today not to take sides, not to amplify outrage, and definitely not to play the partisan game. What I want to do is break down the facts, the context, and the real implications of what we heard in that hearing. Because frankly, the American public deserves an honest, sober analysis when it comes to issues of national defense. Let's get into it. Early in the exchange, we hear confirmation that there was a pause in U.S. offensive cyber operations earlier this year. Why does that matter? Because the Secretary of Defense apparently denied it previously, or at least gave the impression that it wasn't happening.
2027 is the year. According to unclassified DoD assessments, how many warships does China have in its Navy today?
Many and growing.
370. It's the largest Navy in the world. How many does the U.S. Navy have today?
Thanks to this budget, it's increasing
it's a number.
substantially.
I'm looking for a number.
But it's just south of 300.
296, pretty close. How many ships is China expected to field by 2030?
I believe that's a classified number, but it's going to go up at a rapid rate.
CMPR report that was released. There's an unclassified number.
It's going up at a rapid rate.
Let me help you out. 435. Let's see if we do better in EUCOM. What corridor in eastern Poland is vulnerable and a priority for U.S. reinforcements? It connects Belarus to a Russian region.
I'm sure you can tell me.
I can tell you. It's the Suwalki Gap. Which heavily militarized Russian territory connected the Suwalki Gap? It contains nuclear-capable missiles. It threatens all of NATO. It's right there in the middle of Eastern Europe.
I see we're playing a quiz game here.
It's
ultimately,
Kaliningrad
thankfully,
Oblast.
we're getting our NATO allies to step up in their spending to make sure that they can hold the line.
Mr. Secretary, I asked you a specific question. Thank you. It's Kaliningrad Oblast. So what percentage of Ukrainian frontline casualties, let's talk drones, are now caused by FPV drones?
A very large percentage, and we're studying that conflict closely to understand
I hope so.
that fact.
It's over 70%. And which U.S. service has written doctrine or standardized procurement for integration of FPV drones?
That's the Army.
I wish that were the case, but actually the answer is none of them. So we're not prepared yet, and we need to get there fast. Let me turn to a different topic. A few weeks ago, when my office opened up in Fredericksburg, I spoke to the mother of one F-18 pilot who flew the March 15th mission over the Red Sea in Yemen that you discussed over Signal. I spoke to her again on Tuesday and asked her if there was anything she wanted me to bring up. She believes that you need to resign. She also had several questions, but one thing, she said she would appreciate an apology for putting classified information. Her son couldn't even tell her where the Truman was going, but into the Houthi PC small group Signal chat that risked her son's life and the mission. Mr. Secretary, yes or no, do you think you owe her an apology?
Please make sure to let her know how grateful we are for the skill and heroism of her
I am very much grateful. I'm sure everybody in this room is grateful. I'm proud of what her son has done. The question is, do you owe her an apology for your actions? Are you going to be accountable?
It was an incredibly successful mission. Her son did great
They
work.
did a magnificent
and
job.
Thankfully, the Houthi campaign was successful.
Secretary, I agree with you. Magnificent job. The performance of those pilots and Navy personnel, magnificent. We're talking about what you did and accountability. Are you going to apologize to the mother or not?
I don't apologize for success.
You don't apologize for putting her son's life in danger and for putting the mission in jeopardy. Well, that's really disappointing and not befitting the type of leadership that our troops and families deserve. It's frankly a stunning lack of OPSEC. Privates are trained to do much better than that. It was reckless. And it sounds like that accountability doesn't extend as far as the Secretary of Defense. So I think you should resign. The mother says she wants you gone. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlemen.
Now, for those unfamiliar, offensive cyber operations are how we disrupt adversaries' capabilities before they can harm us. They're controversial, but absolutely essential in today's modern defense toolkit. If it's true that operations were paused without congressional oversight or clear explanation, that's a problem. Not just because it limits our strategic options, but because trust between the Pentagon and Congress is absolutely critical for national defense oversight. Next, we get into personal territory, the congressman questioning whether the secretary was even qualified for the role. This is a harsh line of attack, no doubt, but it's worth remembering that cabinet-level positions are often filled by a mix of expertise and political appointments. Has the secretary been in the role long enough to master the briefings? Or are we seeing someone still catching up to the gravity of the job? This is where I think the congressman's criticism resonates. At 4.5 months in, especially in a time of global instability, it's fair for Americans to expect that their defense leadership is fully prepared and sharp on the details. China's Navy is now the largest in the world, approximately 370 ships compared to our 296. And by 2030, China's on track for 435 ships. That's not fear-mongering. That's just numbers. But here's the key. Quantity doesn't always equal quality. The U.S. Navy still leads in terms of aircraft carriers, nuclear-powered submarines, and long-range strike capabilities. But this gap is narrowing, and the congressman is absolutely right to press the Pentagon on specifics. Publicly, the Pentagon has used 2027 as a benchmark for potential conflict readiness in the Pacific, and that is coming fast. It's fair for Congress to push for answers on whether we're pacing ourselves properly against that threat. Let's shift to Europe. The congressman brought up the Suwalki Gap, one of NATO's most vulnerable regions, connecting Belarus to the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. In military strategy circles, this is old news, but to the average American, probably not. The implication here is that if Russia were to act aggressively in that region, NATO could be cut in half. That's why it's critical to have credible plans and reinforcements in place. But what struck me was the tone. The secretary seemed unprepared for that line of questioning, which frankly isn't a good look when talking about potential flashpoints in Europe. Here's where this hearing really hit on something strategically urgent: the rise of FPV drones in modern warfare. Over 70% of Ukrainian frontline casualties are reportedly from FPV drones. These are cheap, effective, and they are changing the face of war. And yet, according to this hearing, the U.S. military hasn't standardized doctrine or procurement for them. That's a big deal. We're talking about a military that historically leads the world in innovation, and yet we're behind in adapting to one of the most rapidly evolving weapons systems of this generation. As a neutral analyst, I can tell you this isn't a partisan issue. This is about modernization, plain and simple. We have to catch up. Now, this is where things got very personal and controversial. A mother of an F-18 pilot claimed that the secretary discussed details of her son's mission in a private signal chat, potentially compromising operational security. If true, that's a serious breach of OPSEC. To be fair, we don't have full independent verification of that yet. But here's my view. Regardless of partisanship, accountability should apply across the board. Nobody should be above scrutiny, and sensitive military operations should never under any circumstances be casually discussed in unsecured formats. The secretary's response? He repeatedly pointed to the success of the mission. I understand wanting to highlight the mission's outcome, but that doesn't erase the responsibility for safeguarding lives and information beforehand. So, should the secretary resign? That's a tough call. From a leadership standpoint, refusing to apologize to the pilot's family looks bad. Apologies don't necessarily imply guilt. They can also be expressions of empathy, responsibility, or simply recognition of concern. The bigger problem here isn't just about one secretary. It's about ensuring that leadership at all levels in the Pentagon is transparent, prepared, and accountable. That applies whether the leadership is Republican, Democrat, or independent. Here's my takeaway, folks. The U.S. military faces real challenges today, from China's naval rise to Russian aggression in Europe, to new forms of warfare, like FPV drones. Congress has a responsibility to press for answers, and they're right to do so. Leadership must be held to the same standards that every young service member is expected to meet, including OPSEC. But we also need to balance this with constructive solutions. Congress shouldn't just focus on criticism. It should drive reform, funding, and modernization to fix these gaps. As for us, as voters, as citizens, as observers, let's keep paying attention. These hearings aren't political theater. They're windows into how prepared we really are for the challenges ahead. If you found this analysis useful, hit that like button. Subscribe for more neutral breakdowns on national security and global affairs. And let me know in the comments what's your take on what happened in this hearing. Do you think leadership accountability is where it needs to be? Let's have that conversation below. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. Stay sharp.